So all of this is made dramatically more complicated and challenging by the fact that we are at a point all over the country right now where we're paying the bills that have been accumulating for the last 25 years, particularly in states and cities where school boards have agreed to pensions and health insurance for retirees and things years ago, not knowing how we were ever going to pay for it. We're at a point right now where it's hard to do change and reform when more and more of today's dollars for education are being spent in yesterday's classrooms. And we're at a point right now in a lot of places, like we've seen in the auto industry, like we've seen on Wall Street, there's going to have to be bailouts of public education systems. What my organization is trying to do is make sure that we're prepared, because this is an issue I think the public would be much more likely to support. If we're going to bail out school systems that haven't been working, we need to be able to show that those same school systems are going to do things differently in the future. So it's about building community will for the possibility that things could be different and using the leverage that comes from a massive influx of dollars into school systems to say, do you want this money? And if so, you're going to have to change on behalf of children. I will end it with that. I look forward to your questions.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday forum featuring Joe Williams, Executive Director for Democrats for Education Reform. We will return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate your questions now and remind you to keep them brief and to the point. We welcome you to this City Club forum. We want to remind you that members and guests alike are welcome to attend City Club forums and hope everyone listening will join the City Club. Please visit our website to see a full schedule of our upcoming programs. Our greetings go to those present in this room, especially to those of you who are guests. We hope you will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. We welcome guests today at tables hosted by Baker Hostetler, Citizens Leadership Academy, Friends of St. Martin de Porres High School, and the Gun Foundation. Thank you for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome to our forum students who are here as part of our City Club student program. Participation of these students is made possible by a generous grant from an anonymous City Club member. Today we welcome students from Glenville High School. Will the students please stand and be recognized? Now we would like to return to our speaker, Joe Williams, for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Development Assistant Director Lucille Barbati, here, and PR and Program Manager Carrie Miller. So let's have our first question, please.
Welcome to Cleveland, Joe, and I hope you're successful, because even though I'm not a Democrat, if you're successful, my kids will do better, and so will the Libertarians and all the rest of them.
Amen.
I had 2 quick points. In my 60 years as a parent, there seems to be a direct correlation between student performance and parent involvement. And how can you address this problem? And the second one is, have you studied the rhubarb about the Board of Educations in Texas selecting the textbooks for the next 10 years for the country?
Yeah, I'm going to leave the Texas one out of this. It was just I've read about it, and I guess my blood starts to boil when I do.
So do I.
Yeah. I neglected to say the gong sort of threw me off before. Thank you to the City Club for hosting this. It's an honor to be in your amazing list of people who've been up here. So on your question about the parent involvement, and I agree. I've lived this through my own children. It's obviously crucial. I don't think, though, that we can allow it to emerge as an excuse for why things aren't working. I think we're starting to see 2 different things happening from the highest performing schools around the country right now, particularly in urban areas. One, we're seeing schools that get particularly good at teaching parents how to be better involved in their kids' education and view the educating the parent as part of their comprehensive role, because they understand that if they don't have that parent help at home, their work during the day is going to be difficult. On the other extreme, we're starting to see, particularly from schools that work a long day, that the reason they do a longer day and longer school year isn't just to have more time on the academics, it's to keep kids out of their home life. I mean, they feel like if they can't If they can't rely on parents to be the support network that they need, they try to find ways to create as much of a support network that will compensate for that. But I think it is crucial. I think, though, a lot of times the lack of parent involvement gets used as an excuse for not being able to educate kids, and I think we've got to blow past that or we're going to get stuck. So.
Yes, Mr. Williams, first off, when you were with the New York Daily News, did you help write some of the headlines there?
I wish I could claim credit, but I didn't.
And secondly, how do you compare the benefits, the good points of charter schools, private high schools, and public schools?
How do I compare the benefits? I mean, look, I try, and my hope is that we get to this point soon. I think we've been sort of backed into a lot of debates and positioning where the charter school people have to insist that all charters are great. The private school people have to insist that private's the only way to go. The public school people insist that we're wondering why everybody's talking about private schools and charter schools when they're doing good things too. If we can ever get to a point where we start talking about good schools and bad schools, and then have the secondary conversation be how we got there. What was the mechanism? Was it a charter law? Was it some kind of school choice enabling legislation that allowed students to attend? Was it good leadership in the public school? I think if we get to that point, I think we're going to have a much better conversation. I acknowledge it's really hard to do as political as this stuff gets. I think the way President Obama describes his support for charter schools is that he doesn't support charter schools, he supports good charter schools, and it sounds Weasley in some ways, but at the other end of the spectrum, I think it's the right way to go. So I don't have a better answer for you on that. I think great charter schools and great public schools are as good and as important as great public schools, and that's sort of the way I look at it.
Joe, there's a movement afoot by the National Governors Association and the State Superintendents Group for Common Core standards. Can you tell me how you think that fits into the reform discussion?
Yeah, I think that it depends what state you go into. So in a state like Massachusetts, where they really believe they have a good set of standards, there's a potential, if they were to jump on to national standards, for them to go south. And a lot of other states where the standards have been fairly lame can benefit from this if they go up. It's sort of this interesting dynamic. A few years ago, people would have said, there's no way we're going to get national standards. But I think the idea of possibly dangling money out there from the federal government to states that are willing to sign on to this, and rather than trying to get all 50 states, trying to get groups of 10, 12 for now and see if they can sort of create some consensus around there that it's going to go somewhere. I mean, I think where this becomes important is the increasing realization that kids in Cleveland are no longer competing with kids in Detroit or Cincinnati, but they're competing with the kids in Singapore, and the fact that we don't have a sort of national understanding on what fourth graders are supposed to be doing at the end of fourth grade. It's sort of holding us back from really assessing where we're at. And there are states, and we learned this through No Child Left Behind when we started really holding states accountable for meeting certain benchmarks on tests, that a child who is proficient in one state could be labeled non-proficient in another, and it's confusing, and so it is picking up speed on that. We don't really have a strong opinion as an organization on the concept. I think we're going to wait and see what the standards look like at that point.